Now, thank you. Now, who recognized that? That was Beethoven's Symphony No. 9, Ode to Joy. And if you're like me as a kid, you probably wondered what the conductor's doing up there with their hands and how they do it. So to answer the first part, we do it to keep the orchestra synchronized together. And in terms of how, let me show you. So grab a pen, pencil, just your finger, and I want you all to raise your right arms with me. Okay, everyone ready? I'll mirror you. You go down like this, to the left across your body, back to the right, and up to the top. Okay, all together now. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Wonderful. So each of you just experienced one of the many, many ways that music can quite literally bring us together. And what if we could do that more broadly? Not just for musicians, but for people all across the world, across divides of race, religion, politics. Well, that piece was one of the first songs I learned on the piano as a kid. And as a kid, I absolutely hated the piano. But when I first moved to Utah to be close to family, my grandma Vera Lee would come and she would teach me piano lessons every week. And as she'd move my hands around on the piano, I began to feel some of her love, not just of Beethoven, but of music more broadly. And so I adopted that love. And a few years later, when my big sister started playing the cello, I of course had to copy her. And so soon I was in the orchestra and I was making some of my best friends to this day. And this music has been such a blessing for my life. A few years later after that, I was not only doing piano and cello, I was in the orchestra, I was in the choir, I'd even signed up for the school musical. And so as an adult, I realized the only ground left was just to become a conductor of the entire orchestra. And so, again, this has brought such rich joy and emotional intelligence to my life. And I'll bet that it has for each of you as well. So I want you to pause and think about your favorite concert that you've ever been to. Picture it in your mind for a second and think about not just the experience of watching those artists, but also the feelings that you felt. And I'll bet that you really did feel something, and more, I'll bet that you were sharing those experiences, those feelings with other people. And that is truly part of the power of music. For me personally, whenever I listen to the Ode to Joy or play the Bach cello suites, I get chills on my skin. As I think about the way that these artists, these composers living hundreds of years ago, totally different countries, totally different languages, are somehow expressing and articulating emotions that I've always felt, but never myself been able to express. That's the emotional intelligence piece. And ultimately, I believe that that power can extend to each of us. But I didn't know that first. And so at the beginning, I took it for granted. And it wasn't actually until I moved here to the Bay Area that I realized how lucky I'd been to grow up in a community that just echoed with music. And don't get me wrong, the Bay Area has an incredible musical heritage. But unless you're part of a school with a good music program, you're going to have to find that through community arts organizations. And especially after COVID, these organizations just don't have the budgets to effectively market and fund themselves. And so again, it's inaccessible. And so at first when I moved here, I was not only leaving behind my family and my friends and my beautiful dog, I also was leaving my musical family. And so I felt lonely. I felt disconnected. I felt adrift. And more, I know I'm not the only person to feel this. Roughly 1 in 5 Americans feel significant loneliness on a day-to-day basis. And this is everyone from little kids who were left behind in school during COVID to the elderly who just don't have multi-generational families anymore. And this loneliness is as damaging to our health as smoking or obesity. And not only is it damaging to us as individuals, it's also damaging to society. And we can see it tearing at the fabric of society in ways like hate crimes increasing 60% over the last 5 years. And wealth inequality growing to the point where 10% of the world now has 3/4 of its wealth. And lying right there at the root of this is the idea that most people, most Americans, don't have any friends of the other political party. Can you believe that? Like, how can we be letting that stopping us from having effective dialogue? It's not just that we can't agree on things, it's we can't even talk about them. And that just causes so many other problems. It keeps us from getting things done, and it keeps us as individuals from living healthy, effective, productive lives. So what do we do about it? Well, for me personally, I began to overcome my loneliness by rebuilding my musical community. At first, when I moved to the Bay, like I said, I didn't have anything. But eventually, I found a church choir to join, and at that church choir, I happened to see a flyer for the Temple Hill Symphony Orchestra. And this orchestra, unfortunately, was not at all easy to get to. It involved me hauling my massive cello across the Bay on the BART during rush hour traffic every week, and you would not believe how many weird questions I got about playing this big guitar. I got so many weird looks, and ultimately it was a hassle, but it was always worth it because my friend, our first violinist, Sibel, was always waiting there to pick me up from the train station. And just as before, she and so many others have become some of my closest friends and mentors. And not only did I start to make these friends, I also began to feel part of a community. I began to feel like I was part of something bigger than myself, and as I served these people, working as a personnel manager and as a conductor, I really felt like I was contributing to a cause that transcended myself. And that was such a beautiful feeling. And I want that for each of us. And because I've seen it, I believe that music can help each of us and society as a whole to conquer its dividedness. But it's not just my opinion, it's also science. There is a huge array of scientific evidence that supports this idea that music connects people. Starting with the Smithsonian Institute, we learned that music has been around for over 40,000 years. And it activates older areas of the brain than even language does. Specifically, it releases two neurotransmitters, oxytocin and dopamine, which many of you probably recognize as connectivity neurotransmitters. And so this increases our empathy and our perspective taking. And it's pretty cool. This empathy is so strong that according to researchers at the University of Gothenburg, when we sing together, our heartbeats even begin to synchronize. Our heartbeats, can you believe that? It's pretty incredible. And I could keep going here. The science is fairly clear though. Music is a deeply connective tool that helps us build relationships with others regardless of how different our backgrounds can be. But it's also not just science, it's also personal experience that I've seen as a conductor. I first witnessed the power of music to bridge divides of language and culture while working with Dmitry. And Dmitry is a composer living in Ukraine, 10 time zones away, in the middle of a war. And yet, while we were working on an upcoming project together, we were able to develop a real sense of kinship. We had a lot of Google Translate involved, but ultimately, he's invited me to come to Kharkiv to teach conducting and learn from his students as well. That's pretty cool. I've also witnessed the power of music to bridge divides of socioeconomic class. Our orchestra brings together Bay Area tech multimillionaires, sitting side by side with others who have had trouble literally putting food on the table. But they come together in the Temple Hill Symphony. In this orchestra, they are equal, they are each needed, and they are all valid. And I honestly can't think of another place where that happens. And finally, I witnessed the power of music to overcome divides of disease and isolation when COVID tore apart society, threatening to bring our orchestra along in the ride. At first, we lost opportunities to perform, so donations slowed, and our community began to disintegrate. Where before I'd seen Sibel and some of these others every week in person, soon our interactions became relegated to texting and email. But soon enough, we also saw an opportunity. For the last 35 years, our orchestra has performed an annual Christmas sing-along of Handel's Messiah, the Hallelujah, Hallelujah one. You probably recognize it. And our music director, Jay, wasn't about to let a pandemic stop us from getting number 36. And so we called up hundreds of our musicians who'd scattered all around the United States at this point, hundreds, thousands of miles away. And we got them to record themselves on their phones and then stitch them together. And it was a massive amount of work to get this pulled together. We had to hire sound engineers and videographers. But ultimately, we were able to create a really incredible performance. And because it was virtual, we were able to do cool two things. First, we were able to reach a larger audience than ever before. And second, and this one's more fun for me, I was actually able to get my mom to join us all the way from Utah when we hadn't had the chance to play music together in years. And people thanked us for bringing music into their lives during the toughest of times. And that's the power of music in helping us build those beautiful but unlikely connections across divides. And it goes almost without saying that our musicians and our audiences were not black or white, we're not Republican or Democrat, rich or poor. We often don't even speak the same language. But when we're playing music together, when we are appreciating and creating the emotions of Beethoven, little else matters. We quickly establish shared ground that helps us bridge divides and build connections that heal our prejudices and transcend the boundaries of music. So, again, what do we do about it? Well, the answer is we need to create societies that prioritize community. And that happens through music, sure, but even things like sports or the local book club or your quilting circle, however you want to get there, is something that I support. But we also have a uniquely powerful tool in music. It is uniquely emotional and uniquely social. And so we need to do two things specifically. The first is to prioritize K through 12 musical education, and especially for those who can least afford it. Now, people's connections to music often last a lifetime, but they often also begin very early in childhood. And so by increasing the accessibility of music to those who can least afford it, we not only increase the number of people who feel connected to music, and thus to society, we also challenge our preconceptions about what a classical musician looks like. And of course, this is a broad political and social journey, but ultimately we need to make sure that we're prioritizing our music programs as much as we prioritize our football teams. And this specifically looks like a couple things. First, hiring more music teachers at livable wages, choir, band, orchestra. Second, making sure that we have free instrument rentals and repairs so that students can even take that first step towards musicality. And finally, we need to make sure that when the going gets tough, as it did during COVID, that we don't defund the school orchestra. But that's just the first part. We also need to make sure that people don't lose music when they leave school. And so I'd love to ask each of you, how many of you, by raise of hands, played an instrument, sang in choir while you were in school? Wonderful. Keep them raised, keep them raised. How many of you still do? Exactly. So many of us lose music when we leave school. And this is a tragedy, because although we retain our individual connections to music, it ceases to be social and it loses some of that power to help us build connections. And so what we need to do is to build a pipeline between educational and post-educational music. And the way that we do that is by better funding our community arts organizations. We need to make sure that we give them the marketing budgets and the PR budgets and the connectivity budgets so that they can reach out to students who need the music and who need it in their lives and the individuals who've lost it, and then bring them back into the sphere of musicality, bring them back into the folds of society. And as we do this, I promise that we are going to create a better society. We're going to create people who are less lonely and more connected. People who feel like they're part of a bigger cause like I did. We're going to have people that are healthier, they're happier, and they're more willing to have discourse with others, and then we can really get to the heart of figuring out what we agree on. But it starts with music. Now, this is great for society, but what about each of you as individuals? Well, there are 4 things that you can do. The first is to vote to fund the arts. The second is to donate, if you can, to the local arts organizations we're talking about here. Be that change that you want to see. Third, participate, whether by signing your friend up for the school marching band, joining the local garage band, or even just going to a concert. And finally, each of us needs to nourish our individual connections with music. When Grandma Vera Lee died a few years ago, I realized the gift that she had given me. Not just to be able to play the piano, sure, but to be able to create and appreciate music with others. So give that gift to yourself. Whether you like Beethoven or the Beatles, Tchaikovsky or Taylor Swift, this music increases your emotional intelligence and your capacity to connect with other people. So again, give that gift to yourself. You don't need any skill or expertise, although you do all know how to conduct now. You just need an appreciation. So please, give that gift to yourself. Go pick up the instrument you left behind in school. Sing in the shower if you have to. Listen to your favorite album and share it with someone else. Thank you.